Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
There is a moment in Back to the Future that has been sitting in plain sight for 40 years. Millions of people have watched this film. They have rewatched it with their children, quoted it at dinner tables, and called it one of the greatest movies ever made. But almost none of them have ever noticed what is hiding inside one of its most chaotic, adrenaline-soaked scenes. Not a subtle lighting inconsistency, not a background detail that only a film student would catch. This is something far more significant. A man who was fired from the movie, whose name was erased from the credits, and whose involvement was buried so completely that most fans have never even heard the full story, is still visible in the final cut. He was never edited out. The studio knew. They made a decision, and that decision has been playing in every version of this film ever released. So today we are going to slow everything down, go frame by frame, and show you exactly what is hiding inside this beloved classic. Because once you see it, you will never watch that scene the same way again. Before we get to the blooper itself, you need to understand the kind of pressure this movie was made under, because that pressure is the reason the blooper exists at all. Back to the Future started as a script that Hollywood treated like a bad joke. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale developed the idea in 1980, a time travel story built around warmth, humor, and genuine heart. No crude jokes, no shock value, no cynicism. Just a teenager, a brilliant eccentric scientist, and a machine that could break the laws of physics. They believed in it completely. Hollywood did not. Studio after studio passed on the project. Not 2, not 10, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 separate rejections. The feedback was consistent and brutal. The script was too clean, too family-friendly, too innocent for a marketplace that was hungry for edgy adult comedies that pushed boundaries and sold tickets on shock alone. Nobody, they were told repeatedly, would pay money to see something this wholesome. Everything changed in 1984 when Zemeckis directed Romancing the Stone, a film that performed brilliantly at the box office and proved he could make crowd-pleasing movies with real storytelling craft. Suddenly, the same executives who had ignored him had reasons to return his calls. Universal Pictures stepped back to the table, and the project finally had a home. But getting through the door was only the beginning of the chaos. Even after Universal signed on, the studio's president sent a memo insisting the film be renamed Spaceman from Pluto. Zemeckis and Gale were horrified. Steven Spielberg, who was producing, handled the situation by responding to the memo as though it were an amusing joke rather than a serious request. The title survived, but the casting situation was about to become far more complicated. Zemeckis had always wanted Michael J. Fox to play Marty McFly. Fox was the right energy, the right timing, the right physical presence for the character. The problem was that Fox was locked into the television series Family Ties, and his showrunner had no interest in sharing him. Fox was not even aware the offer existed because it had been quietly kept from him for months. By the time the production could not wait any longer, they cast Eric Stoltz in the role instead. Stoltz was a serious, committed actor. He threw himself into the preparation. He spent weeks building his version of Marty McFly from the ground up. The problem was that his version of the character did not match the tone of the film. His performance was too heavy, too dramatically intense. The story needed lightness and comedy, and the kind of effortless charm that makes a hero feel immediately likable. Stoltz was delivering something closer to a dramatic character study. Zemeckis watched the footage, hoping it would come together. It never did. After filming for 6 to 7 weeks, nearly half the entire production schedule, Zemeckis brought in Spielberg to review what had been captured. Together they made the call. Stoltz had to go. The news was delivered through his agent rather than directly, and the decision cost the production $4 million in reshoots. Replacing the lead actor halfway through filming was the kind of catastrophe that can sink an entire project. Universal executives were watching the budget spiral with genuine alarm. Fox finally received the script, called it the best he had ever read, and joined the production immediately. But because he was still contracted to Family Ties and could not leave that show, his schedule became something almost impossible to believe. For 3 straight months, he filmed the television show from morning until early evening, then drove directly to the Back to the Future set and worked through the night until 2 or 3 in the morning. He slept for 3 to 4 hours a day. On Friday nights, after live tapings of Family Ties that ran until 11 at night, he got into a car and went straight to the film set, working until sunrise. His driver would carry him into his apartment afterward because he was too exhausted to walk himself inside. The editing window for the finished film was 6 to 8 weeks. For a production of this scale, with the amount of footage they had and the complexity of the visual effects required, that was almost nothing. Some visual effects were not even complete when the film premiered on July 3, 1985. They were fixed afterward for the home video release. The audience in the theater that opening night had no idea. Now here is where things get genuinely strange. With all the reshoots that happened after Stoltz was let go, with all the money and effort spent making the film look like Fox had been there from the very beginning, the production still missed something. Or more accurately, they saw it, acknowledged it, and made a deliberate choice not to fix it. Go back to the mall parking lot sequence near the beginning of the film. It is one of the most kinetic and exciting scenes in the entire movie. The night is quiet, the DeLorean is parked and waiting, and then everything erupts into motion at once. Marty is running across the lot. The Libyan terrorists are chasing him in their van. The DeLorean is accelerating across the open tarmac. The editing is fast and the tension is real. Now slow it down. Watch the wide shots carefully, specifically the moments where the camera pulls back far enough to show the DeLorean from a distance. In several of these shots, you can see the driver through the window of the car. Not perfectly clearly, but clearly enough. And if you know what you are looking for, you will immediately notice that the person inside that vehicle is not Michael J. Fox. It is Eric Stoltz, the man who was fired, the man whose name appears nowhere in the credits, the man whose performance was deemed so incompatible with the film that the production paid $4 million to replace him. He is right there, inside the DeLorean, visible through the glass, in a scene that hundreds of millions of people have watched over the past 4 decades. The reason this footage was never replaced is straightforward and entirely about money. The shots in question were wide enough that Stoltz's face was not clearly identifiable to an average viewer watching at normal speed. Reshooting those specific angles would have cost money the production simply did not have left. The editing team flagged it. The conversation happened. The studio looked at the remaining budget, looked at the release date, which was locked and could not move, and made a calculated decision. The shots were ambiguous enough to keep. The film went out as it was. The parking lot is not the only place where traces of the original casting survived into the final film. Once you start looking, you find them in other scenes as well, and each one tells you something about how chaotic and rushed this production truly was underneath its polished surface. Watch the skateboard chase sequence carefully, and pay attention to the physical proportions of the character you are watching. Michael J. Fox stands around 5 feet 4 inches tall. Eric Stoltz is approximately 6 feet. That is a significant height difference, and it shows up in certain shots if you know where to look. The silhouette of the figure on the skateboard changes between cuts in ways that go beyond the explanation of different camera angles. In some moments, the figure looks noticeably taller. The jacket sits differently on broader shoulders, and the movement through the frame has a different quality to it. These are Stoltz's scenes, kept because the face was not visible, and the cost of replacing them could not be justified. Then there is the diner confrontation. In the scene where Marty faces Biff in Lou's cafe, watch what happens to Marty's hair across different cuts within the same sequence. In some shots, his hair is the natural brown color associated with Fox's appearance throughout the film. In other shots, within the same scene, the color looks distinctly darker. When Stoltz was playing the role, his hair had been dyed to match the character description. That darker shade is visible in specific cuts of this scene, strongly suggesting that some of the footage used in the final edit was never res hot and comes directly from the original Stoltz production days. At the same time, notice the height dynamic between Marty and Biff in those same shots. Fox is nearly a foot shorter than Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff. That difference should always be obvious on screen. But in certain cuts during that confrontation, Marty looks considerably closer to Biff's height. Stoltz, being 6 feet tall, would naturally create that visual effect when standing beside Wilson. The patchwork nature of how that scene was assembled becomes visible once you understand what you are looking at. There was also a second actor who disappeared entirely from the production, without most audiences ever knowing she had been there at all. Melora Hardin was originally cast as Jennifer, Marty's girlfriend. She had been cast opposite Stoltz, and the chemistry worked for that version of the film. When Fox replaced Stoltz, the physical dynamic between the two leads changed so dramatically that Hardin no longer fit the role. She was replaced by Claudia Wells. Two actors were effectively erased from the same production, and one of them is still present in the film if you slow it down and look. What makes all of this so fascinating is not just the individual moments of error or oversight. It is what they collectively reveal about the conditions under which this film was completed. The 6 to 8 week editing window should have been several months for a production of this complexity. The decision to keep known mistakes in the final cut, because the release date was unmovable, tells you everything about the pressure the studio was applying. The financial panic that followed Stoltz's removal, the exhaustion of the lead actor, who was sleeping 3 hours a night for 3 months, the visual effects that were not finished when the film premiered, these are not the conditions under which a polished and controlled masterpiece is normally produced. And yet the film is a masterpiece. That is the genuinely extraordinary thing about it. Every mistake that slipped through, every visible seam in the patchwork, every shot where the wrong actor is visible through a car window, none of it breaks the experience. The story is so well constructed, the characters so clearly drawn, the pacing so precise that audiences simply never noticed. The film works so completely on its own terms that the flaws become invisible when you are watching it the way it was meant to be watched, caught up in the momentum of the story.